Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 3, Chapter 11, The Star's Revenge. So last week, our intrepid heroes, Paymaster Stenstrom, Gwendolyn, and the rest came to grips with the Drury Brothers in the dock. They were initially successful. Gwendolyn and Tara were able to get several coils, 2 to be precise, into the Seeker. The Marians were able to get aboard the Seeker cloaked with invisibility that their star often gives them. When the Drury showed up, Paymaster Stenstrom made a commotion, made a grand speech, and drew the Drurys to him. And there were so many, he could only gun down so many. His guns can kill anything, but they're single-shot weapons. His strikers cracked at least once during the fight. He was just overwhelmed, and he doesn't have his It Man abilities down there. And Chance made mention that they once fought a guy named Darius Jones, and if you remember earlier in the book, he was one of the sisters' It Man. He was a hero from Baz, and his lore has grown in the League of Elder. He's associated a lot with Princess Gallia. A lot of fun stories regarding Darius Jones jilting Princess Gallia at the altar, but they still had numerous adventures together and are the foundation of the mythology that are told on Baz. Stenstrom ran out of places to run. He got captured by the Drurys, and they roughed him up hard. It broke his collarbone, broke his thigh bone, compound fractures, bones sticking out. It's looking bad. They bring him on his knees before Chance, and Chance cuts off his hand, one of his hands, getting retribution for Stenstrom pulling his hands off earlier in the book, and their Kestrel overlords pick his hand up and eat it. Gwendolyn, aboard the Westminster, which blasts out of the Seeker, comes down, comes to his aid, kills one Kestrel, gets caught in the red beam. And I've never really fleshed out what these red beams that the Kestrels cast do. Countess Sigillis often had to deal with Kestrels with her silver tech, and her silver beam, their red beam, they kind of mingle in the middle and kind of explode and do all kinds of things. But it caused Gwendolyn a lot of pain. She started smoking. Stenstrom then finishes off the Kestrel with his Marzible daggers, about 6 of them, right to her head, and the Kestrels die. And Chance is pretty happy. Like I didn't like those 2 anyways. Now that they're gone, we can lay carnage on the League. And Stenstrom entered this fight in a very fatalistic fashion. He didn't really expect to survive it. His job was to make a distraction long enough for the Marians and the crew to get aboard the Seeker and hide. And his job was accomplished. And anything after that is irrelevant. He's close to death. He's close to going into shock. He has no It Man powers. So this could be looking bad. And it's looking bad for Gwendolyn too, because she put herself down there trying to help him. And now she's amidst the Drurys as well. So, let's begin. This is a shorter chapter than the last couple, thankfully. Part 3, Chapter 11, The Star's Revenge. Let's resolve this on the dock and possibly say goodbye to Paymaster Stenstrom. Chance gave a cry of victory. Stenstrom was thrown to the floor, surrounded by a gallery of Drurys, who whooped and laughed. Innocent stepped forward and gave him a hard kick to the midsection, sending him flying.
"Yeah, mate, this is gonna be just grand. I've lots of plans for you. We're gonna be real chums for long."
He kicked him again. "Leave him alone!" Gwendolyn screamed, reaching out for him. Several Lemuels held her down, and one kicked her smoking fedula away. They laughed. Oh, I hear a lady crying out for a little attention. You feeling hungry, Paymaster? Lemuel asked.
He looks real hungry,
Clem said. Lemuel brandished a small knife.
Well then, let's feed her to him.
Gwendolyn struggled, but they held her down. Lemuel pulled her coat and shirt away, revealing skin. He began cutting, and Gwendolyn screamed. As the army of Drurys closed in for the kill, something caught their attention high above.
What in the name of green grass is that?
Chance said, leaning back, mouth open. High above, something floated. It was some sort of round globe, yellowish, wreathed in an undulating column of hissing red smoke. Stenstrom dimly glanced at it. It looked, from his sister's frequent descriptions, like the Star of Marion. They looked up at it, incredulous.
For my children,
an ethereal voice said,
whom you so cruelly murdered.
The chamber filled with a twisting funnel of fog. The Drurys were making a terrible racket, yet the whole place fell into an unnatural calm as the fog took hold. It's the road, the Marion's road, Stenstrom thought. High above through the fog, 4 gleaming points of bluish light appeared. 4 stars in a rectangular constellation shone down, bathing the dock in a starry light. Camelopardalis, the sisters' constellation. Stenstrom was filled with starlight, and his smashed body became whole once again with the sisters' power. His bones were mended, his hand regrown. With the sisters' might, he threw off the Drurys and knocked them away from Gwendolyn. He took Innocent to the ground and utterly destroyed him. Alone, he flew into their ranks, toppling them blow after blow. He tore at them, pulling them apart, smashing them to bits. He ripped the manufactured flesh from their bodies and hung them with it. Robotic arms and legs, sculpted heads, and colored squares piled high on the dock in a mountain of metal and wire viscera. The Drurys had never known such terror. Chance went running. He headed down the dock, moving as fast as he could. "Kill the woman! Kill the woman!" he shrieked. As the Drurys came at Gwendolyn trying to get to her, Stenstrom stood over her, smashing, destroying. Clem created a lance, reared back and threw it. It sped towards Gwendolyn. Stenstrom caught it in mid-flight, spun it around and threw it back towards Clem. It exploded. And then there was a rumbling from the water. A towering creature made of a patchwork of red, green, and blue squares burst into the air. Metal tentacles reached upwards, grasping the remains of the Demophalon John and the pole-mounted robotic arms on the dock. "Good creation! Intellidrone!" Clem yelled. "It's a big one! Get it! Kill it! It'll be the end of us all!" The Drurys turned their attention to the robotic beast and made to engage it in battle. Tentacles came down. Screaming Drurys were lifted and pulled into the water. 2 crewmen wafted onto the dock near Stenstrom in a cloud. He picked Gwendolyn up and handed her to them. "She's wounded. Get the lieutenant and any in the Westminster back into the Seeker. Get the ship out of here by any means you can," he shouted, and they bore her away. The battle at the water's edge was desperate and near hopeless. The raging robotic monster in the water was rapidly getting bigger. It reached up and snapped the poles mounting the robotic arms like twigs. It then consumed the arms, adding them to itself. Huge fingers of the arms opening and closing, infused with a new colonial consciousness. The Drurys assailed it with exploding lances, blowing large pieces of it off, only to have those pieces replaced almost instantly. It seized the bullet-shaped hull of the Westminster and set to work on it. Stenstrom thought he saw the expansion of a waft cloud in the cockpit as the robotic monster incorporated the ship into itself, the hull being plopped on like a rudimentary head. The giant Intellidrone reached out with its metal tentacles and seized the flailing, screaming Chance Drury. Stenstrom stood and watched with pleasure as it commenced to beat his body roughly against the hull of the Westminster. It reminded him of Lieutenant Kylos from his New Faith days, and how she had a bad habit of cracking walnuts with her forehead in the mess. Bang, bang, bang! Chance Drury's robotic body fell apart into a host of yellow squares, instantly absorbed by the Intellidrone monster. Explosion after explosion rocked its growing body. With flailing metal tentacles, it seized one Drury after another and pulled them apart, taking the tiny robots, making their bodies and adding them onto itself. Through the chaotic din of shouting and monstrous bellowing, another sound came to the front. A great whistling roar from nowhere, growing louder and more throaty with each passing moment, threatening to deafen all on the dock. There was only one thing that made such a terrible, glorious sound. It was the Seeker, its engines spinning up, its dormant systems coming live and proud. Its main sensor came to a dim but steady glow, lighting up the dock. It strained against the shackles the Drurys had thrown across it, throwing them aside, freeing itself. The Seeker had been mute and silent since the Admiralty had scuttled her. Now she would roar. Stenstrom listened and watched the ship break free. Now, whatever happened to him on the dock didn't matter. He had done his job. His people were safe. He found his lost inks and put them back into his sash. Let these monstrosities consume each other, and good riddance in any case. And he could only hope the Drury suffered mightily in the process. He saw something come running back out of the assembly area. It was a boxy, funnel-breasted robot with the word dunce painted on its torso. It was running fast on spindly legs, sort of high-stepping, knee-kicking as it ran. It was Chance Drury back again, wearing the dunce body. It had to be him, for it carried himself like Chance did. Apparently, no other bodies were left for him to wear.
"To the head! Get to the head!"
several Clems screamed. "No!" Chance yelled in a panic from the dunce's latex mouth. "You stand here and fight this beast! I shall go to the head!" He was carrying 4 metal tablets, each one stained red, blue, green, and yellow, which he clutched to his soup can breasts as though they were precious to him. He headed for the levels above at a high-stepping run. Those tablets must be the source code information for reconstituting the Drurys. "Chance!" Stenstrom roared, following at a run. Climbing a ladder, Stenstrom saw him standing at a large control panel. Pressing buttons, he opened a set of doors somewhere high above, and a wall of water at high pressure came rushing into the docks, ready to wash away any standing in its path. He then turned and ran into a long corridor. Stenstrom was hot on his heels. He entered the corridor just in time to see a door closing at the far end. He charged, covering the distance quickly, and crashed through it. Through the door was a small control room with a chair and numerous monitors. There was a hinged yellow device sitting on the floor. As Stenstrom entered, it came to life and sprang shut like a loaded mousetrap, and then exploded, devastating the room. When the smoke cleared, the room was destroyed and the door had been blown off its frame. The control desk melted to slag and was on fire. However, Stenstrom appeared fine and unfazed. Even his clothes seemed untouched. He could hear the powerful rushing of water behind him. The place was rapidly flooding. There was a burning staircase at the far side of the room. Stenstrom ran up them. Atop the stairs was a short hallway paneled in silvery metal. He topped the stairs and ran down the hallway. The hallway opened up into a dock, similar to the one below, only it was much smaller. There, mounted on a robotic sling, was the head on the hearth. He saw Dunce Chance clattering up the gangway, arms and legs flailing as he ran, carrying his tablets. His blonde wig fell off and floated on the water. The gangway closed, and quickly the strange ship coiled and came to life like a rank warhorse confined in a tiny stall. He saw a bank of guns mounted on the head's port side rotate in his direction. He dove out of the way as a hail of explosive fire splintered the doorway. Behind him, a surge of water came rushing in as the dock quickly began to flood. He thrashed through the water. He reached out and found the girders of the head. He locked on and gripped hard as a set of doors opened ahead. With a clank, the ship surged out of the flooded dock and soared down a tight, twisting tunnel. The tunnel suddenly headed upwards as Stenstrom held on for dear life. He became vaguely aware that the head was consistently smashing against the side of the tunnel in an obvious attempt to scrape him off. He could feel the pressure of the ship against his body and the roughness of the tunnel wall. Ahead, a pressure hatch opened with a dark stain of water suspended high above via containment. At speed, his coat flapping like a flag in a stiff breeze, the head surged through the containment into the pitch black of the water. The lights went out. Stenstrom felt the crushing squeeze of hundreds of feet of water on top of him. He could see the occasional flash of strobe lights mounted on the head and the bluish glow from the engines. The water felt rather warm as he surged up through the depths. Warm blackness turned to gray, then to greenish blue, then to an eruption out of the water into the stormy sky. The head quickly gained altitude as Stenstrom hung on. Having no issue maintaining his purchase on the ship, he began hand-over-handing to make his way to the crew capsule about 70 feet ahead. He could hear the rush of wind and the roar from the engines of the ship as it rocketed skyward. He pulled off several large pieces of girder and tossed it down the intake of the nearest engine. The engine sputtered and flashed. He tore off more metal and tossed it in. The engine then exploded. The vessel leveled off at several thousand feet and descended a bit. Stenstrom pulled off more pieces of the ship and threw them aside as he climbed forward, ripping off a thruster and other assorted bits. The head lowered to about 100 feet above the water and slowed to a near stop, the damaged engine smoking in an inky manner. Something in the water below caught his attention. A huge dark mass formed in the water. Something leapt out, spanning high into the air. It was coal black, streaming with water. It was long and tubular, like a massive earthworm about 10 feet wide and an unknown length long. It had a round, flattened head with a circular, tooth-ringed mouth like a hagfish, and its serrated, ivory-white teeth stood out from its dead black body. It had an unbroken ring of red, beady eyes placed in a line just behind its mouth. "That's a Cronin!" Stenstrom thought as the nightmare creature approached, mouth open. "I'm about to be eaten by a Cronin!" The Cronin came up quick, gurgling, and took Stenstrom and a fair portion of the head in a single bite. And with that, we conclude Part 3, Chapter 11, The Star's Revenge. So, psych! Paymaster Stenstrom wasn't going to die in the dock. I'm not that wet, I'm not that lame to kill off the hero in such a anticlimactic way. It would have been a big anticlimax if Stenstrom met his end right in the middle of a battle with everything still unresolved. We see the Star of Marion seeking revenge for what the Drurys did to the Marions, her children, entered the dock area and sent the road to him. Now, as I've established in the past, with a lot of power running, the Star of Marion can't pull people away, but it can deposit things. I established that earlier, so if you're wondering how did this happen, it's because the Star of Marion can put things there, just like she deposited Stenstrom and Tara and Aram, but it can't pull people out again. And I had to put that in just to make it too easy for the heroes to escape. They have to turn off all the lights, turn off all the power in order to be pulled back out. Don't ask me why, I just work here. And using the road the Star of Marion showered Paymaster Stenstrom in the light of Camelopartis, and that's where he gets his It-Man powers from the sister, through the light of that constellation. And invigorated by it, his bones mended, his hand grew back, and then he laid terror on the Drurys, pretty much smashing them. And then a giant Intellidrone comes rushing out of the water, and as we saw earlier aboard the Seeker and here in the dock, these little robots that make up their bodies, sometimes when they're separated from their host, from their main body, and they kind of link together and form a rudimentary colonial consciousness. They start off small, just with 1 or 2 squares, but then grow. And it's very important that they not allowed to do this, because they'll create some sort of colonial beast, like a giant Portuguese man of war. When it happened on the Seeker, Tara just pulled the squares apart and it went dead. Here, nobody was paying attention, and this Intellidrone that was wrapped around Clem as Paymaster Stenstrom shot it, fell into the waters of the dock. And below the water, it kept on adding pieces to itself, and it gets bigger and bigger until it comes bursting out of the water, spoiling to add more squares to it to get bigger. It incorporates the Westminster to itself as like a head. It used the robotic arms as like fingers, and it kept on adding dead Drurys to itself. They tried to ward it off with their missiles, but it was replacing parts just as fast as they were knocking it off. Chance gets picked up and then incorporated into the Intellidrone, which I thought was kind of funny. And then he comes back as the dunce, because they're out of Curials on the dock. So he comes out and he's carrying these tablets, which apparently is some sort of source code for the Drury Brothers. And he flees into another dock, and there's the head on the hearth. He hightails it out of there, but Paymaster Stenstrom is locked onto it, and with his It-Man powers, he's able to hang on until they get to the surface, and he's pulling off pieces of the head, and he wrecks an engine and some thrusters, but then he gets devoured by a Cronin. So that's where we leave off. And to me, I've always had a fear of mouths full of sharp teeth, and so to me, the Cronins are very scary. I don't know how that translates, but to me, I find them quite scary. Next week, Part 3, Chapter 12, Words with the Cronins. And next week, we're going to find out a few things. And we're going to find out that we've all been making assumptions. And maybe those assumptions are not all correct. So, until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out!